Bonjour Rose-Cathy et merci de m'avoir invité à t'accompagner, à co-modérer certains de ces panels aujourd'hui. Et effectivement, avec Jean Gabin, le sujet est lancé, les difficultés sont lancées. Je retiendrai 2 points peut-être. C'est ce qu'on demande d'apprendre aux élèves, donc apprendre à connaître, apprendre à faire, apprendre à être, apprendre à vivre ensemble. Mais il y a définitivement caché plus ou moins dans les réflexions de Jean Gabin, le aussi réapprendre à enseigner. Ce prochain débat, parce que ça va être un débat d'ailleurs, je pense, cette première table ronde va réunir Marie Birdsell, Yero Gassama, et je pense qu'on va se parler justement de réapprendre à enseigner et de réapprendre à enseigner dans un écosystème spécifique. Donc, en attendant que nos invités nous rejoignent sur le stage, et voilà. Hi Mary, bonjour. Bonjour Yero, bonjour Marie.
Bonjour.
Comment allez-vous? How are you? Tout va bien?
Oui.
Très bien, merci.
Parfait. Donc, petite question et petit rappel pour les participants. Vous aurez la possibilité d'écouter cette prochaine discussion dans votre langue officielle de choix. Je voudrais demander à Mary et Yero de se sentir également à l'aise, de me répondre, me parler dans leur langue aussi préférée et on s'adaptera. Donc, je vais commencer d'abord par les biographies. Pour vous présenter, merci d'avoir été disponible pour cette discussion ce matin. Mary, first, your introduction, votre introduction. You are right now the Executive Director of Justice for Children and Youth, GFCY. You have been a lawyer, actually, before even being an ED, you have been a lawyer for this organization since 25 years, working on including direct representation of youth people, task case litigation, public legal education, community development, systemic law reform, and mentoring and supporting child rights advocates in your office and beyond. That is the purpose of your career, of your engagement. There is a lot of passion in all this. You will tell us more. Your biography is actually 2 pages. So I hope that in our conversation, please feel free to talk about all the work that you do, especially making sure that the UN Convention of the Right of Children is applied in our domestic law. Thank you very much for being with us, Mary. And we also have Yero. So should I choose French or English as the first language? How do you feel?
I'm okay with both. We can go with English.
Okay, let's go. So Yero, thank you very much. You have a busy life. You are the student life coordinator at York University right now. You are yourself, you came into Canada and to York as an international student. Mm-hmm. You lived in 7 countries before arriving in Canada since 2012. I love what you said about you, actually. I have to say it. You love everything to do with personal optimization, productivity, fitness, and health. So you are definitely very entrepreneurial, one of the skills that is needed in the 21st century. And you coordinate the first-year experience program, such as Glendon Orientation Day, and other initiatives to make sure that the international students joining us feel that they have the best environment to learn. My first question may be for Mary. We are joined today to see how to build essential skills among young people to prepare them for the job market. But that comes within, it's not just education. Education comes within a system. There is the environment they are growing in, and you are working with young people and children that are affected by systemic issues, different issues. So my first question is, how do young people you're working with have been affected by this pandemic, and what does it tell you about the environment that they are growing in and learning?
Well, I mean, I think that that my perspective, certainly in terms of the young people that we work with, young people come to us for legal services. All of the people that we work really directly with live in experiences of low income, so they are experiencing poverty often, and as you identify, many different kinds and levels of systemic and other forms of discrimination. That mean they're facing adversity in many ways. So I think that there are a lot of important high points. And in terms of the pandemic, I would say that I think many young people are facing all of the same kinds of issues that adults are facing, which includes increased isolation, increased vulnerability to the negative kinds of adversity that people might feel or experience. Violence, poverty, and other kinds of social isolation, as well as simply anxiety resulting from the specific circumstances around the pandemic. So, youth mental health issues are going to be a huge concern, not just right now, but facing us in the coming years as we all seek to recover from the pandemic. One of the things that young people experience is a kind of social exclusion and a kind of sort of discrimination in the world that's unique to their age, because we do discriminate against young people on the basis of age. We make decisions for them. We exclude them from participating in meaningful ways in all sorts of societal systems. The kinds of things that people experience in the world of employment, where they might be vulnerable, they might be taken advantage of, they face economic precarity and employment precarity. Those things have all been exacerbated in the pandemic, and the ways in which video and virtual kinds of opportunities like this really advantage many of us, and young people are included in that, also have the effect of really isolating people. And although it's wonderful to be able to, reach out and connect with so many people, so vast distance, that kind of thing, and it's broadly, there's something different about meeting you in two dimensions and on a screen, as opposed to having been able to share time in a room with you. So those would be some of my, it's a huge question, and
Yes.
Lots for us all to think about.
Absolutely. We will get back to some of the points that you mentioned. Yero, Mary used many times the word isolation. When it comes to international students lately, they've really arrived or actually stayed stuck in their country in very, very specific situations. What are their mindset right now? What are you hearing from these students coming into their first year experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been, to Mary's point, a challenging time, I think, especially for international students who their whole reason for, coming to a university like York or somewhere out of their country is to experience the culture, experience the connections that they can make. So that aspect being removed definitely created more of an isolation and a sense of wonderment, like why am I doing this if I'm not getting the full experience that I signed up for? So I think there's a lot of hunger on their end to be able to fully participate. I think technology has allowed us to integrate them and incorporate them in different aspects, but there's some aspects that are still missing from the experience. So for them being able to finally come to Canada and be able to fully engage. For example, we have students that already have done a first year or second year even from their home country and are now in the process of being, preparing their entry to Canada. So January coming up will be a very busy period. We have a lot of international students coming, and from what we've been asking them in the surveys and just through conversations, what are they looking for? I think a lot of them are looking to finally be able to engage and meet their fellow peers, find out really what their institution is about, get the full sense of aliveness and presence, find out what the residence life is like, and be able to take advantage really of the opportunities presented to them, because it's a little bit harder when you're in a faraway country. So hunger is something that we're sensing, a kind of a fatigue of online in a certain way, but still a gratitude that it's allowed them to be able to engage, because you can imagine in a world where we didn't have these possibilities and there was a situation, you wouldn't be able to study or even engage in any meaningful way. So some gratitude there, but really a hunger for what's coming next and to be able to fully participate. I think that's the mindset that we're seeing right now.
Yes, thank you. And what's coming next is job market, also looking for a job, and for some of them staying within the country. I'm wondering, what are the views of Mary? You said we are taking decisions for them, and that kind of stopped around 18 years old, right? And suddenly everything is in our hands. It's supposed to be in our hands. Studies, and then the job market. What are their views when you talk? When you work with the youth that are the most vulnerable? They're living so many systemic issues, and some of them don't even have the support in their family, not because they don't want to, but that they can. What are their views of their future? What is this job market for them? What does it represent even?
Yeah, I think that's a very challenging question, because for different people, it will mean very different things. And so Yarrow is talking about young people who are coming as international students, maybe to Canada. Some of the young people that we work with include young people who have grown up in Canada, but in fact don't have sort of official immigration status. And so they are facing a tremendous amount of precarity there, and we're trying to support those young people. Other young people who are facing the sort of really intense issues of homelessness and whatnot are so vulnerable in the job market, because they really are hungry in a different way than I think Yarrow was describing, and desperate maybe. And so that creates a whole nother series. And they really do need the support of adult supporters who can help them to navigate these different situations. If they've got a potential employer who is not doing things in official ways, and who might be seeking to take advantage of them. Those are circumstances that we see pretty frequently, not like simple as not payment of income or they don't get paid properly. And there are resources like us and like other folks out there to help young people in those circumstances. I think the other thing is that we're seeing, lots of job opportunities in like the service sector, in the restaurant world. And so for some young people, these are really exciting moments of opportunity to find at least entry-level jobs and get some experience, have some access to income. But things are also very changeable. So young people who are graduating high school, having been online and virtual for a number of years now, almost really, what is it like to return to class? Students who are starting post-secondary in, where everything has been virtual over the last year, and making that adjustment to going back to being in person, or you're in second year university, but you've never really had the kind of university or college experience that many of us would expect, where you're able to connect in person with your community. And so I think the shifting tides, contribute to this wide variety of experience. So some people having wonderful experiences, some people having very, very difficult experiences. And I think as adult supporters, we can really try and appreciate that vast differences of experience, and try to offer supports for stability, regardless of what the young people are looking for.
Yes, we often say that a country is as good as the way he supports the more vulnerable, like how many citizens he's actually leaving behind or on the side of what's the promise. The promise of Canada, Euro, is quite strong. Students come into this country because of things like a bit like US probably was the last century, but we're talking about equity, we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about excitement around a new world like entrepreneurship and things like this. Is it the reality that they find?
Very good question. And what we've seen, at least what I've seen in my experience and from talking to my colleagues and different people, is there's different buckets of students. So there are certainly the students that are able to find those that reality, that promise, and be able to fulfill it. And generally, those are the students that are just in a different mindset and are able to kind of capitalize on these opportunities. So the mental space that I find that you need sometimes to be able to see these opportunities is very important. So a student who's maybe struggling with their classes or personal relationships, or have some situations at home that are kind of clouding their view of things, aren't able to maybe find these opportunities and take advantage of them. So the first step for a lot of students is to be able to get some basics things in place to create some stability first. I think the importance of feeling grounded, knowing what's expected of you in your classes from your peers, your relationships, your time management, especially figuring those pieces out first, allow you some sort of space to then open up your antenna and look, because what I find is that the promise is there, the opportunity is there for sure, but it's not going to come to you. You have to kind of take the steps to go towards it and make it your reality. And so the resources are there, the people are there, but finding them sometimes can be a challenge, I think. So back to that point around isolation, if you can manage to move yourself out of it and challenge your comfort zone a little bit, and figure out what those key resources and people are. So being able to then walk with your antennas up and say, well, okay, I'm seeing these opportunities now. Where's the gap? Because there's usually a gap between where you are and where you need to be, and being able to analyze that and say, okay, maybe there's something I need to work on in my time management. There's something I need to work on in my my presentation skills, or whatever skill you notice that is why you feel maybe not comfortable asking for that opportunity or that service. Working on that is vital. So one of our jobs is to be able to make sure we talk to students and understand where they're at, because we can throw as many resources and things at them, but if they're not in a place where they can receive that, it's hitting a brick wall. So making sure they feel stable, and then they can participate in the promise, because for sure it's there. I think there's a lot of cases where you can find that to be true, both at any university in Canada or even maybe in the US. But to be able to actually make that happen, there is a few steps that have to happen. So it is there, but it doesn't come to you. You have to kind of seek it and reach out.
Yeah, mental space, stability, being grounded. Mary, I guess that's something that resonated. I've seen you react to what Yero was saying, because that's missing. Like, Yero, you were also talking about buckets, and Mary, you said that also. Like, there is so many different situations for those youth and children, and it seems that we really don't have, it's $1 million question, like how can we support each one almost from where they at. So Mary, what are we seeing in the system right now that is certainly not working for the youth that don't have the mental space, don't have the support, and actually don't even receive the keys to get grounded and to build the stability inside them at least?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most profound thing that we're seeing, and we all know this to be the case, but is the growing inequities that exist. So people who are doing well, doing better and better. The extreme examples are the billionaires in the world who've spent the pandemic being richer and richer, and people who experience poverty having deeper and deeper levels of poverty and social exclusion in many different ways. The issues about systemic discrimination, in particular anti-Black racism and systemic racism of Indigenous people or toward Indigenous people, are in the news and happening a lot. But I think that sometimes it's easy for those of us who are more comfortable to really just ride over what that means for people. And, we see it in little bits and starts. And for many, many people, that is their entire reality, and you can't leave it. So the answers are not simple, but I think you raise important points. And I guess the reason I was responding, everything that Yarrow has said is resonates powerfully, and I think really is applicable across the kinds of different experiences that young people have, is, creating opportunity, appreciating that we don't all start in the same place, so that, assisting and providing extra kinds of assistance and support to young people who are experiencing much more adversity than others. That's, we're constantly trying to work and create opportunities that some of us take for granted that others don't have at all.
Yeah. Yes. One of the challenge, the issue that you work on is youth criminal justice. We're reading the news these last days, and then I live in Mississauga, like Rose Cathy, and we start seeing more and more things happening in schools or very close to schools, secondary schools. What is your take on this? Where is this fracture building from?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I hope will be sort of good news thoughts about this and otherwise. I think that the reality in Canada is that in general terms, youth criminal justice is actually not a problem. One of the things that I sometimes say, which is really just very anecdotal, but, of serious kinds of incidents, we know all about them because they always get reported. So it's not that there is, a tremendous amount of unreported, very serious crime involving young people. There's not. We know about, not all of it, obviously, but the majority of it. So when serious things happen, we tend to be quite well informed as a society in Canada. And of course, there are serious and difficult and violent incidents that occur. And we need to be attentive to those things. I think sometimes we focus on young people as sort of offenders, but really when we hear about difficult circumstances, terrible instances of violence, we have to remember that there are people who have behaved criminally in those circumstances, and we need to address those issues. But there is also a whole community, people who've been victimized, people who are, friends and loved ones of accused people and criminals, and, people who have behaved criminally, and other people who are affected by those events. So we have to be able to respond to all of that. And one of the things that we know about criminal justice, I mean, you're talking about very serious instances of violence. So those are more complex. But most young people who get involved in the criminal justice system are only there once. And they resolve their issues, and they find a different path, and hopefully they wind up with Yarrow or one of his colleagues in the next stage of their life in a very positive way. And one of the things that we do in Canada that we really recognize in important ways is that young people are at a time in their life, in a time of their developmental lives, when they sometimes make rash decisions. They often, in the spur of the moment, can make decisions that don't take into consideration the long-term implications. They're vulnerable to peer pressure, and they make mistakes. And most young people who make mistakes really fully recover from that. And so we want to make sure that young people are particularly entering the education streams and the employment streams that, and they're able to do so without the sort of negative stereotyping of having been in trouble that comes with it. So we protect their privacy, but we also do many, many things to make sure that our societal safety is protected. So I think that as adults, as employers, as educational stream folks, we don't need to worry that there's a violent underbelly to young people. There is not. And most kinds of violence and adversity comes in the context of other kinds of adversity. So there are things that we can do to offer hope, to offer support, so that young people know they have choices and options, exactly the kinds of things that Yarrow was discussing earlier.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I was playing the devil advocate with my question, finding a moment to address the elephant in the room. And as you said, like really, we're talking to parents, we're talking to adults and youth as participants. And it's very important that we hear this and we take a breath and that we look, okay, what's this environment? And the hope and the support that you're talking about. Jean Gabin, who was presenting just before, was talking about the skills that we need right now, actually, and that we need to build within the youth. Question for both of you. Is it working right now? Is it those skills that we see in the system, being post-secondary or secondary school? I can list some of the skills that he was talking about. One thing is there is a statistic saying that by 2030, 2/3 of the jobs that will be available on the market will be based on soft skills, not really hard skills, because technology will be like catching up and doing tons of things around us. So the soft skills that he was mentioning, for example, is agility, adaptability, entrepreneurial spirit and initiative, public speaking and presentation. Yero, you mentioned that. Curiosity, imagination, analysis of information, critical thought, and problem solving. Those are the soft skills that we seem to need to build. How are we doing that right now?
Mm-hmm. I don't mind going first. That is a big question that as the university as a whole, we're different parties are involved in, whether it's the career counselors, career center, the accessibility, learning skills, all aspects of the university have to come around this idea of what are the frameworks that we need to put in place so that students know, first of all, what's needed, and then second, how to talk about it. So for example, for Europe, there's a framework called the Becoming YU framework that's designed to teach students about the competencies that are needed and also to apply them in the jobs that are offered. So I work with, on average, about 7 student leaders that are work-study students, so students that are working part-time and studying part-time. And all of the jobs on campus adopt this model so that students know when they're checking in with their supervisor or their coach, what goals that they're setting and how they plan to build these skills. So whether it's the communication aspects, personal relationships, all of the skills that you mentioned, to assess themselves first. So there's an assessment that they do to find out, well, where am I on these skills? And then next, which ones do I want to focus on? So we tend to want to do everything, but that's not realistic. So we usually will ask them to pick maybe 2 or 3 that are the ones that they feel are the most important. So whether it's critical thinking, problem solving, those are the ones that we see come up the most. And then to work with their coach to figure out how to build those skills. And the ideal, the end goal is so that when they graduate, because we have a lot of students who are able to engage and get involved and do so many things, and then they graduate and they're like, I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel confident in my ability to enter the workforce and the labor market. And a lot of, they think it's a lack of experience, but it's really a lack of being able to talk about that experience and in a meaningful way to that employers can understand. So building the language to understand what are employers looking for? Well, we have these. This is what you worked on. This is how your experience and your jobs and your involvement directly help you build that so that you can go and talk about those. So to reduce a little bit of that gap and that fear between graduating and entering the workforce. So I think the developing frameworks that take into considerations what are the skills that are actually necessary for them to be able to enter the workforce, identifying those and building a framework and a curriculum where we can apply it directly with students that are working for us at the university, but also expand it to students who are involved in different capacities, whether you're a student leader at a club or a student organization, whatever else you're doing outside of campus, to be able to talk about it in a way and to focus on those skills. Because like you said, the technology is catching up. So it creates a lot of fear and there's a lot of opportunity, but the soft skills are even more so needed now. So if you can focus on those and maximize your skills there, the opportunities are pretty wide. So I think universities are catching up and building frameworks to allow people to build those. Is everybody there yet? I don't think so. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that everybody's aware of this kind of program and to that they can benefit and participate in it. Like the framework I'm talking about came into existence just when I was graduating. So it's fairly new, right? So I think we're starting, but we need to accelerate, I think.
And you talk again about this proactivity, actually, and this personal development, taking in charge your own kind of journey and taking advantage what is starting to be offered on the campus. Thank you, Yarrow. Mary, so there is the individual, then there is the community, and then there is kind of the system, right? The civil society and the governments. And my next question is, what should be done, or is there something that should be done by, in terms of public policy right now, to advance these skills, the ability actually of the youth that are left out to access those skills?
Yeah, I think that's probably where I fit in terms of what we experience and see on our end. And I think that sometimes people think it's a sort of soft conversation to talk about hope, but I actually think that that's the essence of what all of the kinds of systemic and social supports can do, is shift, the kinds of things that you were listing in terms of soft skills that are needed to be successful in a modern economy and in a modern society, and the kinds of ways that we're able to support young people at universities are fabulous. And I think we are, as Yarrow says, maybe we're not all the way there yet, but we do know a lot and we are moving. How we, sort of, a terrible climate change pun, I suppose, but raise the water so that every boat is floating, which is not necessarily what we want to do in the oceans, but
I hear you.
Trying to support young people who are suffering and who are experiencing the worst kinds of social ills, including violence and extreme poverty. I think we have to remember that when your family members are, the adults in the family are not home because they have 2 or 3 jobs just to try and put food on the table and pay the rent. Those are very difficult circumstances for young people to grow up in. And there isn't a lot of time, they may have a tremendous agility, tremendous adaptability because they are forced to,
Exactly.
but it comes with other kinds of costs sometimes. So we have to be protective against those costs. And one of the things that I would say, that I would really encourage people to think about is that sometimes, I think young people who have had tremendous opportunity and they've been able to go overseas and they've been able to volunteer at wonderful things, and we see that as fabulous. They've had all these really broad-ranging experiences, and we overlook the young person who has worked at an entry-level service job all the way through high school. And my pitch would be, those young people have all those skills, but as Yarrow said, maybe not so able to talk about them in those terms, but having worked to support yourself through high school and help to support your family, those are tremendous, young people with tremendous drive and attention and focus. And we really have to recognize that if your resume is very short and includes working at a retail job, for all the way through high school and maybe post-secondary, that's a kind of tenacity and dedicated, service that we should really recognize as being powerful and important.
Very much articulating, articulating the strengths and the abilities that have been developed or exist already within each experience of this youth. Absolutely. The job market itself. So we talked a bit about education, and unfortunately we were supposed to have Carole, a teacher at the Conseil Scolaire Viamonde, with us, and she had to excuse herself for personal reason. But what about the so we're talking about the system, the educational system. We also have the student experience with us. What about the teachers? What do they need, maybe, that they don't have today? What is your thought about this? Are they supported?
Yarrow, why don't you go first?
It's a fair question. I'm not too involved in that, but because what I see is more so the end product that comes out once the students are leaving that environment. And also we produce a lot of teachers, right? So there's a lot of, especially at Glendon, a lot of future French teachers and things like that. So I think I do see that they need some more support to be able to work with the students that they have to talk specifics. I'm not enough in the know to discuss those, but what I can say is that I think there is some maybe even from the university side, some more support that teachers can have in terms of what what are the basic foundational skills that they should be talking to their students about. What are the conversations that they should start having with their students, so that the gap, I think we're always looking at the gap, like what's the gap between somebody who's leaving secondary and coming into post-secondary, and what are the conversations that they've had that they're comfortable with. So making certain conversations more comfortable. So in terms of what's available and what can be done to support teachers, I think maybe some things are being done, but I do feel a sense that more can be done and more should be done. I think maybe there's certain aspects of the job that are making students doubt whether they even want to become teachers. So that sense of doubt, I think, is a reflection of that need. So if there's anything that we can do to support teachers, maybe giving them more resources. If you're in a classroom with so many students, it's hard to give everybody the attention that they might need. So maybe there's something there that can be done. A lot of students will choose a environment like Glendon because of the smaller classroom environments, so that they can have access to the professors and resources and things like that. So I think if more one-on-one help, I'm not sure how much resource and time teachers have for that, but but the more we can do that, I think the better we can support them, so that we can also increase the incentive for people to become teachers, right? I think we need more teachers. So whatever we can do to make that a little bit easier on them, the better, because that's something that I'm noticing.
Yeah, we need more teacher, and we need actually also more French teachers.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that, definitely. So this summit is about youth, but more specifically about French-speaking youth. I'm wondering if there is something specific that you noticed or that you want to testify about, Mary. And I'm saying testify to a lawyer. My goodness, I shouldn't say that. But are there any particular experiences or realities that French-speaking youth are facing that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have anything terribly helpful to say. I'm also distracted just a little bit about the questions in the chat. But I think that in the Francophone youth world, some of the exact same kinds of broad range of experience. So there are some folks who really are able to make very good use of their multilingual circumstances, and lots of young people, Francophone young people, are very multilingual. So it's a really tremendous advantage in some respects. But at the same time, it can also create other kinds of barriers. And, there are lots of Francophone young people who have come from abroad, and Canada is a good place to land because we have 2 official languages. And Ontario is a fairly good place to be in that regard because, outside of Quebec, there's a fairly robust Francophone community and places to go and ways in which to use your multilingual status, perhaps. But it connects to your question about teachers, because I completely agree with Yarrow that at the secondary level and primary level as well, one of the things that would be supportive to students is to resource teachers better. I think we do a tremendous amount, and this is especially true for Francophone teachers and Francophone school boards. We ask a lot of teachers. We ask them to be all things to all students, and it is overwhelming and actually impossible. And so making sure that schools have access and students and teachers have access to the kind of supports to overcome adversity that students need is something important. And so I think that can be sort of an extra burden in the Francophone school boards and for Francophone teachers, because there aren't enough of them, and because sometimes those school boards are a little bit smaller and then are less well resourced. So, I don't mean to sound like a person who's saying, resources meaning money, but there are many things that, the ways in which, for instance, we pay teachers is a demonstration of how much we value that role in our world. Yes. And we desperately need that role in our world, and we ask a tremendous amount of them. And so demonstrating our support in all the ways is important. And I think parents are sometimes that parent-teacher or parent-school relationship can be very difficult. And so parents need supports in terms of how to build relationships and how to have, good interconnected relationships with school. And so we encourage parents also to participate, to ask teachers questions, to ask the school administrators questions, and be part of school life, because parents are experts in how their students are in one part of their life, and teachers are experts in how students are in another part of their life. And bringing those things together is supportive to students, I think.
Very much. Thank you, Marianne. You're giving me the perfect segue for the next and last question, because it was coming from the comments, and I was keeping that kind of for the last. Students, so a question coming from the participants, students and kids feel disconnected between what they are learning versus what they think will happen in the real world in their future. How can we help them as parents to reassure them? Yarrow, maybe to start?
Sure. I think that's a great question, and that's something that I think people often leave out in the conversation about building, the youth for the next phase of their life. So there's a few things. I think one is also supporting parents just in the transition phases that students go through. So even when we do an orientation for students for first year orientation, there's a separate orientation that's a parent orientation that is very important. So the more parents attend that, the better they're able to navigate the journey that the students will go through. So not all parents will attend that, but I think it's a sign of maybe where parents can start helping students. I'm talking specifically about the university experience right now, but for example, being able to know what are the different life cycles that happen when a student is going through university, what that relationship between the parent and the university is. One of the biggest differences, and I think challenges that happens for parents, is access to certain information. For example, when a student becomes a university student, where now we want the student to take on more responsibility and initiative. So there's a lot of, for example, documents that can't be shared with parents and things like that only the students can share. So the idea around supporting parents is to make them understand, first of all, at the institution level, how that works, because then there's questions that can come up later in the experience. What if a parent wants to access somebody's grades or see how their student is doing? So really, we encourage them to be able to build that dialogue with their student through the transition phase, to talk about, well, this is sort of what happens. Here are the stages that the student will probably go through, and here's how you can support them. Talking to them about, for example, when the parents know the resources, that is very, very, very helpful, because, as I mentioned, there's abundance of those, but it's hard sometimes for the student to see it. So when the parents are aware, they can, in their conversations, talk about, well, have you tried this, or have you looked at this? So the more informed that the parents are about what's happening in the person's life, and also what's happening around them, that can help them, not to necessarily do those things for them, like reach out to the counselors, or but empower them to tell them, well, these are things that are available. I remember I heard about this during orientation, or I know that this service exists. Why don't you try this? So the more that they can be involved and included in those processes, the less felt out they'll feel, the more that they'll, because it's a transition too. We talk about, students transitioning, but if you're a parent and this is the first time that, your son or daughter or child is going to university, it's a new experience, a totally different experience from what you saw in high school or whatnot. So it's very important for them to have those ideas and understanding. So at the university level, the more, and parents can reach out to us in different services and ask, well, what's available? Can we just have ideas? Can we have orientations? Can we come and talk to you all? That way we can inform them, and they can be better positioned to support their kids. So yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done there.
Well, myself, I'm the parent, and you will hear in the next session of a 13-year-old. So I have some time before university, but I'm glad to know that there is an orientation day for parents.
Yeah.
Because I'm an immigrant. So I learned, like I went to school in Algeria and in France. So the Canadian system is totally foreign for me. And maybe it's my last question, and maybe for you, Mary, because parents, especially immigrants' parents, we arrive here and we have so much to learn for our own life, like everything, and for our own job, for our own housing, navigating so many systems. And then there is this extra support that needs to be given, and this attention that needs to be given to the kids themselves. You're supporting the youth and the children within very complicated systems, within very complicated situations. What about the parents? What do you see them possibly do? What are the advice? I know.
I would be very bold to give advice to many parents.
Tips based on your experience, I should say. That's true. Yeah, advice is hard.
Well, relating it back to the question about disconnection and those kinds of things, I would say that there's no question that the transition from childhood through adolescence and into young adulthood is a difficult time for parents as well sometimes, especially when there are a lot of difficult things going on. I guess one of the things that we use in our office as in terms of trying to offer supports to our clients is to take them seriously and take their statements and commentary and descriptions about their own experience seriously, and appreciate that their experience and the world they're walking into is very different than the one that we experienced as teenagers and the one we're walking into. Whether we're from another country or not, that theme remains true. And so trying to start where your child is at, take their issues seriously. Parents can really struggle to figure out, we don't get an orientation to adolescence the way we might get an orientation to,
I wish.
to university. Yeah, don't we all who are parents or who have children in our lives? And so we're really navigating that as new territory whenever it comes up. But I think paying attention to what your child is saying and paying attention to what your child is saying, not just in their words, but in their behavior. If they're retreating to their bedroom, if they are not coming home, they're saying something by doing that. And they're not always perfect, as none of us are, at articulating what the internal struggle is, but we can tell something by their behavior. And usually behavior that's not going well is a sign that there's something that's not going well, either internally or in their own environment. And we may not know what that is, but we can support them by letting them know that we're trying our very best to listen, and that if we don't have what it takes, there are bound to be other resources in the community, and we can help our child find those. So one of the things that I think connects to what Yarrow was saying about the privacy of information, we like the privacy that young people seek out as they enter adolescence can be jarring for all of us. And trying to respect that I know there may be things going on in your world that I don't know about or that you don't want to tell me about, but I want to support you. I want to support you to make good decisions. I want to support you to be safe. And if I can't do that and I'm not the right person, then who else might be the right person? Let's find you that other supporter. So, we don't have to be like in the same way that teachers ought not to be the everything to every child. We don't have to be everything to the children in our personal lives. We can help them find, as Yarrow describes, find the resources that might be outside the home.
Well, Mary, Yarrow, thank you so much for this conversation. It does take a village to raise a kid. That's definitely what we're hearing. Thank you so much for your presence this morning, and hopefully you will stay a bit with us for additional questions, maybe from the showcase or the networking part. But Rose-Cathy, stage is back to you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That were exchanged, and really I'm going to take the example that Mary was using about the young person that walks his way while he's going to school. Alors, c'est le genre un peu de présentation qu'on aura toute la journée pour voir un petit peu présenter aussi ce qui existe ailleurs, qu'on n'a pas l'habitude d'avoir dans notre communauté francophone, de voir un petit peu l'expertise qui est développée ailleurs, à quoi d'autres jeunes ont accès. Et puis, j'aime bien l'exemple que Mary a utilisé d'un jeune qui travaille pendant qu'il va à l'école, qu'il travaille tout le temps et que parfois c'est quelqu'un qui a bâti de l'expérience, de la compétence, et c'est peut-être quelqu'un qui a travaillé dans un restaurant, à la cuisine, mais que parfois c'est pas toujours valorisé parce qu'on se concentre plus sur des choses qui paraissent plus glamour. Quelqu'un qui est allé à l'étranger, qui a fait des stages, des échanges, ainsi de suite, ce qui fait une bonne transition à notre prochain thème. C'est un thème qu'on a commencé à aborder l'année dernière sur l'importance de promouvoir les métiers auprès des jeunes.